Hey everyone, welcome back. Let me start with a question. How often do you really think about your body as more than just, a body? More than just skin and bones, physical sensations, or even just hitting your fitness goals?
Well, if you're asking me, Alex, most days my body feels like it's fueled by caffeine and the faint hope of a nap. But seriously, where are you going with this?
Okay, so imagine this. What if your body is actually a dynamic, flowing field of energy, deeply interwoven with your soul? That's basically the core idea of the book we're exploring today. It's all about reframing how we see the connection between our body, soul, energy, and consciousness, showing us that they're all intricately linked. It's about tapping into the hidden potential of that mind-body-soul connection to heal ourselves, grow, and live a life with real purpose.
So let me get this straight. Are you suggesting it's time for a major system overhaul? Less about just keeping the engine running and more about achieving a next-level enlightened existence?
Exactly. This book focuses on fundamental shifts, from seeing your body as something static to something incredibly dynamic, from limiting beliefs to unlimited possibilities, and from just simply existing to truly living with purpose. It's an invitation to change the way you see things and, by doing that, change your life.
All right, big promises as always. What's the actual plan of attack here? How do we even start?
Okay, no worries. We're going to break it down step by step, Michelle. In this episode, we'll be focusing on 3 key concepts. First, understanding that your body is more than just a collection of parts. It's an energy field that actively reflects your thoughts and emotions. Second, we'll dive into the idea of the soul, but not in some abstract, unachievable way. Instead, we'll see the soul as a guide that we can find through love, surrender, and creativity. And finally, we're going to finish with practical steps to integrate these concepts into your everyday life. Think of it as a blueprint for comprehensive transformation.
Okay, so we're talking about viewing the body as an energy source, the soul as some kind of internal GPS, and learning how to actually apply all of this. Sounds good. I'm on board. But Alex, I'm going to ask the obvious question. What does this mean for someone like me, with my constant need to snack through life's existential questions?
Well, Michelle, according to this book, even your snack choices could be part of something much bigger, part of aligning your body with your soul and ultimately living with more intention and awareness. So let's dive in. Okay, Michelle, let's dive into the foundation, reinventing the body. This is where we start to understand the bigger picture, the connection between body and soul, by really rethinking what our physical existence means.
Right, Alex. So instead of just seeing our bodies as, these meat suits that just wear out eventually, there's actually something more profound happening?
Precisely. Chopra argues that it's limiting to view the body as just a machine, a collection of parts that break down over time. He suggests that our bodies are dynamic, constantly changing entities powered by energy and deeply connected to our consciousness.
That's an interesting perspective. But science has approached the body as a machine for centuries, right? They've achieved some incredible things like life-saving surgeries and mapping the human genome. Why should we shift our perspective now?
That's a valid point. It's not about rejecting science, but expanding on it, Michelle. When Chopra talks about reinvention, he's asking us to go beyond that mechanical view, to recognize that the body isn't separate from our thoughts, emotions, and intentions. He uses quantum physics as an analogy. At its core, matter isn't solid, it's vibrating energy. So, if the universe works this way, why not our bodies?
So, we're talking about energy fields instead of just, organs and bones. Does that mean I'm walking around vibrating like an electric toothbrush?
Well, sort of. Think of it like this. Every thought, every emotion you experience has an impact on your body's energy field. Stress, for example, releases hormones like cortisol, which can weaken your immune system over time. On the other hand, feelings like love, gratitude, and joy can create biological conditions that help us heal and rejuvenate. It's not just some abstract idea, it's actual chemistry.
Okay, I get that stress is bad, but is positivity like hitting a recharge button? Is there actual evidence to back up this awareness and energy concept?
Absolutely. Let me give you an example. Chopra recalls his early days in medical school, studying cadavers and marveling at the complexity of the human body. But even with all that knowledge, he realized something was missing. Those bodies were lifeless. He asked himself, what if we're overlooking the sacred energy, the creativity that flows through a living body? That was the catalyst for his work.
So he went from dissecting cadavers to dissecting the nature of existence. Heavy stuff.
It is, but his conclusion is quite revolutionary. Reinventing your body starts with choosing to see it as full of potential. Not as something decaying, but as something capable of healing, growing, and evolving.
So, if I see my body as this vibrant, living thing, does that mean I can just forget about needing reading glasses in my 40s?
It's less about ignoring changes and more about redefining them. Instead of fighting aging or being afraid of it, Chopra suggests we approach it as an evolution influenced by our thoughts, feelings, and actions. He points out that even small choices, like what we eat, how we move, and the emotions we focus on, shape the body's journey.
Right, so my body isn't just biology. It's energy, consciousness, and potential. I'm following you. But isn't this a bit abstract? What does this really look like in someone's everyday life?
That's a fair question. Take Aiden's story, for example. He used to approach his body in a very traditional way. Treat symptoms when they appear, follow doctor's orders. But after exploring meditation and tapping into what Chopra calls awareness, Aiden started to see his body as this interconnected system of energy.
And what does that mean in practice? Did he just stop going to the doctor altogether?
Not at all. It meant he started seeing his body as something he could influence, rather than just treat when it malfunctions. He meditated, explored how his emotions were linked to physical sensations, and gradually discovered that seeing his body as energy opened up new ways to heal and thrive.
Okay, so his mindset shifted and his body followed suit. That's interesting, but I still wonder, why does intention matter so much? How can a thought physically shape our biology?
Because those thoughts, beliefs, and actions create ripples in the biochemistry of the body. This is where things like epigenetics come in. It's proven that environmental and behavioral choices actually influence gene expression. Our thoughts, in essence, rewrite the software of our cells.
So if I believe I'm strong, my cells take note and start working harder at the gym?
It's more about aligning yourself to optimize your energy, Michelle. Imagine choosing between a sugar-loaded pastry and a nutritious breakfast. That choice not only impacts your energy levels that day, but also shifts your biology toward either health or imbalance. Now think bigger. How your beliefs, your choices, and your emotional awareness could create long-term states of well-being.
Okay, this is where things get a bit mind-bending. We're saying that everything, from my breakfast to my mood, has some kind of butterfly effect on how my body lives and evolves?
Exactly. And here's the thing. It's not about aiming for perfection. It's about aligning with your body's energy, connecting intention with action. Chopra's point is that when you see yourself as an active participant in your body's creative potential, it completely changes how you approach health, aging, and even your daily habits.
All right, so maybe my body isn't just a list of aches and pains, it's this self-renewing system. Still, I've got to wonder how realistic this is, when most of us are glued to screens, running on stress and caffeine.
Well, Michelle, that's why this approach can be so transformative. It gives people the means to start small, a bit of mindfulness, intentional eating, really reflecting on how our emotions affect us physically. It's less about perfection and more about reconnecting.
Reconnecting with your body instead of binging on Netflix. Noted. But I've got more questions and maybe some pushback coming. Let's dig deeper into this.
So we're shifting gears from just thinking about our bodies to really diving into the spiritual side of things, right? Building on that idea of reinventing the body, we're moving into something even deeper, resurrecting the soul. This is all about how things like spirituality, creativity, and love all come together to affect our overall well-being.
Okay, resurrecting the soul. That sounds pretty intense. But honestly, where do we even begin with something as huge as the soul? Isn't this getting a little too out there?
Not really, Michelle. Chopra actually makes it pretty down to earth. At its core, it's about waking up to who we truly are. Think of the soul like a thread that connects us, not just to ourselves, but to everything around us. It's what gives our lives meaning and depth. And he believes love is one of the most powerful ways to wake it up.
Love. Yeah, the ultimate wake-up call. But tell me, Alex, are we talking about the love you see on greeting cards? Or is there more to it than that?
Oh, it's definitely more complex. When Chopra talks about love, he means it in the purest, most transformative sense. The force that breaks down walls, that energy that creates forgiveness, self-acceptance, and connection. So, think of love not as just a feeling, but as a way of being that really taps into the heart of your soul.
All right, so less about the romantic dinners and more about going deep emotionally. Does he have any real-life examples of how this works?
Absolutely. And one story that really stands out is Jacob's journey. He was dealing with chronic depression, which had become this constant weight in his life. He just couldn't find a way out. Then, in a therapy session, he was asked to imagine his depression as an old man, a tired, worn-out figure he'd been carrying around for years.
Interesting. So he had to give his depression a face? How did that actually help?
Well, by making it external, he could deal with it differently. Instead of fighting against it or blaming himself, he could see it for what it was, an experience he had, but one he could choose to let go of. He gave himself permission to say goodbye to that old man.
That's really powerful. So he changed how he saw his pain? But isn't that much easier said than done?
Of course. It took being vulnerable and using love, not in the sense of fixing himself, but love as in acceptance. Jacob realized that fighting his pain only made it stronger, but through love, he could soften his view and start to heal.
So love became a bridge for himself, not just for others. I think a lot of us could use that shift.
Exactly. And here's the bigger message. Love allows us to face even our toughest emotions with clarity and acceptance. Instead of feeling stuck, we find the strength to let go.
Ah, there's that word, acceptance. And I'm guessing this isn't about just giving up, right?
Right. Chopra sees acceptance not as weakness, but as a path to profound grace. It's about letting go of the need to control everything and trusting yourself and the journey.
But how? You know, surrendering sounds amazing in theory, but for most people, isn't letting go one of the toughest things to actually do?
Well, Annette's story answers that. She had spent years dealing with childhood trauma, feeling stuck in old stories about herself. Her turning point came in therapy when she allowed herself to stop fighting those stories and instead approach them with kindness.
Compassion for her past, you mean? Oh,
exactly. She stopped seeing her insecurities as failures and instead as parts of her story that she could let go of. That act of surrendering, choosing to release judgment, created room for something new. Grace.
So, what did that change look like for her, day to day?
It started small, changing how she spoke to herself, being kinder and more understanding. Over time, that inner talk made a huge difference. She realized she didn't need to chase perfection, she just needed to accept herself as she was.
Letting go of perfection. Now, that's a challenge for anyone living in the 21st century. But it sounds like her surrendering wasn't about giving in. It was more about stepping out of her way.
Exactly. And that's the beauty of acceptance. It clears out the resistance that keeps us stuck and allows life to flow.
I like that. So, acceptance isn't sitting in the passenger seat. It's just letting go of that white-knuckle grip on the wheel.
Perfect way to put it. And as we accept and reconnect with who we really are, we also tap into the limitless nature of the soul.
Limitless? You mean free from restrictions?
Exactly. Chopra says that the soul isn't limited by our physical situations. It's meant to grow, to explore endless options. David's story is a great example.
Okay, who's David and what made him limitless?
David grew up with a heart condition, and for years he saw himself as fragile because that's what people around him kept telling him. That belief held him back, not just physically, but emotionally. But as an adult, David started questioning that story.
So he rewrote how he saw himself?
Exactly. Through things like meditation and self-reflection, he realized that his body's condition didn't define him. He explored his creativity, overcame mental blocks, and changed his life from one of limitation to one of possibility.
That's really powerful. A reminder that breaking free of limits starts with questioning how we see them.
Exactly. And let's go even further. Chopra connects this personal change to something much bigger, the idea that we're all connected.
The big picture. Let me guess. What we do doesn't just affect us, it has ripple effects in the universe?
You got it. And there's a beautiful story he shares about a rose called Peace.
A rose? Okay, you have my attention. What's so special about it?
During WTO, a hybrid tea rose was created called Peace. It became a symbol of hope and resilience around the world, and it was even presented at the first United Nations conference as a sign of unity.
So, one simple thing, a rose, had this huge impact on people's hearts?
Exactly, and it's a perfect example of our choices. Just as that one rose inspired hope across the globe, our acts of love, service, and creativity all play a part in a much larger cosmic story.
I like that. A reminder that even the smallest things can add up to something way bigger than ourselves.
And that's really what Resurrecting the Soul is all about. Waking up to love, acceptance, and interconnectedness, and realizing that through those things, we can change our lives and even the world itself.
All right, Alex, I'll admit it. This is making sense. Resurrecting the soul isn't just some abstract spiritual idea. It's a practical guide for how we can all live more meaningfully. Let's keep digging into this.
Recognizing the soul's boundlessness really sets the stage for examining how to bring these insights into our everyday lives. Now that we've explored the connection between body and soul, things like love, surrender, and interconnectedness, it's time to ground that wisdom into something tangible. Let's talk about practical steps we can take toward wholeness.
Practical steps. Now that's something I can actually work with. So this isn't just about ethereal theories, but actual everyday things people can do, right? A kind of how-to guide for living a better, more integrated life?
Exactly. It's about taking this theoretical foundation we've built and applying it to our personal and collective evolution. Chopra emphasizes small, consistent actions that honor the interconnected nature of our existence, bridging awareness, intention, and action.
All right, I'm ready. Where do we begin building this roadmap to wholeness?
It all begins with one essential practice: cultivating self-awareness through mindfulness and meditation.
Okay, mindfulness. Full disclosure, as much as I want to be present, my mind tends to wander a lot. So why is this the first step?
Because self-awareness is the foundation for everything else. Without it, you're moving through life on autopilot. Take Elena's story, for example. She was juggling work stress, family worries, you know the drill. To manage her overwhelm, she started practicing meditation, observing her thoughts without judgment.
Let me guess. At first it was complete chaos?
Exactly. Her mind was flooded with to-do lists and self-criticism. But as she stuck with the practice, she started noticing patterns, like how certain worries kept recurring. By simply observing her thoughts, rather than getting swept away by them, she gained a new perspective. This actually shifted her response to stress. She became less reactive and more calm.
So mindfulness isn't just about clearing your mind, but learning to live with it no matter how messy it is?
Exactly. It's about noticing and accepting what's there while anchoring yourself in the present. And as that self-awareness grows, you start building a bridge between your inner world and your actions.
All right, so I'll try sitting with my chaos for a while. Next step?
The next step is fostering authentic, loving relationships. Relationships are a mirror for our inner world, and they play a huge role in our emotional and mental well-being.
Okay, so we've gone from inner meditation to outer connection. But relationships are tricky. It's not always rainbows and hugs.
Exactly, which is why authenticity and vulnerability are key. Take Jane and her teenage son, Ethan. Their relationship was pretty strained because they'd fallen into patterns of misunderstanding and defensiveness.
Typical parent-teenager dynamics, right? So how did they fix it?
Jane started practicing mindful listening, really setting aside her assumptions and hearing Ethan out without judgment. During one breakthrough conversation, Ethan revealed how unheard he felt, which completely shifted Jane's understanding. She responded with empathy and shared her own challenges. This act of vulnerability then created a ripple effect. They began rebuilding trust and ultimately strengthened their bond.
That sounds great, but isn't it kind of scary to be that open? Vulnerability can feel like handing someone the keys to your armor,
Absolutely, Michelle. But vulnerability isn't about weakness. It's a strength that fosters real connection. When you strip away those defenses, you make space for real understanding and healing.
Okay, so relationships are about leaning in, not fighting to win arguments. I think I can get on board with that. What's step 3?
Shifting how we see the body. Chopra urges us to stop viewing the body as a machine and start seeing it as energy and consciousness. It's about realizing the body responds to our emotions, thoughts, and intentions.
I feel like this is connecting to what we talked about earlier, how stress or gratitude can actually influence your cells. Got any examples here?
Sure. Chronic stress, for example, creates hormonal imbalances like excessive cortisol, which can weaken the immune system and accelerate aging. But the opposite is also true. Cultivating joy, gratitude, or relaxation triggers a biochemical environment that promotes healing.
So my stress eating habit might do more harm than I thought.
Unfortunately, yes. But the good news is, by practicing mindful habits, like gratitude journaling or even just pausing for a few deep breaths, you can shift that energy.
You're saying the way we treat our bodies is less about discipline and more about honoring this energy idea?
Right. And that brings us to something equally transformative, embracing creativity and spontaneity as outlets for soul energy.
Creativity. Now, that's a curveball. How does painting or writing poems actually help bridge body and soul?
Creativity is a way to release emotions, stimulate joy, and reconnect with yourself. Daniel's story illustrates this beautifully. He was a former athlete struggling with an injury that had just taken away his sense of identity.
Right, because without his sport, who was he?
Exactly. But when he started painting in an art therapy class, he found a way to process his emotions. At first, it was just abstract shapes, anger, grief, but it eventually became a source of joy and a new purpose. Creativity helped him heal emotionally and rediscover himself.
So it's less about being good at art and more about the act of creating for its own sake?
Exactly. It's a window to the soul. And that leads to another key practice, daily renewal.
Daily renewal sounds vague. Is this about self-care routines or something deeper?
Something deeper. Renewal is about creating small, consistent rituals that help you reset and realign. For example, Marta, a busy mom and business owner, developed a simple morning routine, 10 minutes of journaling her intentions and reflecting on gratitude.
10 minutes? That's actually realistic. And what was the result?
It grounded her emotionally and clarified her goals, which obviously made her whole day more purposeful. Her mood improved and even her relationships benefited because she approached them with less reactivity.
So it's like hitting a mental reset button each day.
Exactly. And lastly, respecting the interconnectedness of body, mind, and soul ties it all together. When you nurture one part, like gratitude or mindfulness, the others naturally follow.
And this interconnectedness idea, any stories to really bring it home?
Paul's story is actually perfect. After an illness left him fatigued, he started a gratitude journal. While it felt superficial at first, over time, this practice shifted his entire outlook. He had more energy, brighter relationships, even sharper focus. His well-being pretty much improved on every single level.
So he proved that one small change, focusing on gratitude, can ripple out into every part of life.
Exactly. Practical steps to wholeness don't require perfection, just intention. From mindfulness to creativity, gratitude to renewal, every small, purposeful action realigns us with our deepest selves.
All right, Alex, this feels doable, even for skeptics like me.
Okay, so to bring it all together, we've really been diving into the core of reinventing the body, resurrecting the soul. It's this idea of viewing our bodies not just as, biological machines, but as sources of energy and untapped potential. And the soul? Not some abstract concept, but really a guide to creativity, love, and our ability to connect with others. We've seen how this reinvention and resurrection are totally connected and can lead to some pretty profound changes in our lives.
Exactly. We explored everything from viewing the body as way more than just a machine to unlocking the soul's endless depths. And more importantly, we talked about the actionable stuff. Mindfulness, gratitude, sparking creativity. The things that ground these big ideas in our everyday lives.
Exactly. And hey, it's not about striving for perfection, right? It's about those small, deliberate actions that bring the body and soul into harmony. How do we nurture our energy? How do we open ourselves to love and reconnect with what truly matters to us?
Okay, so here's my big takeaway. Your body isn't just something to be maintained, and your soul isn't some far-off, unreachable concept. They're both dynamic, alive, and intimately connected to how we live our lives day in and day out. That actually feels quite empowering, Alex.
It truly is. And if there's one thing I'd love for our listeners to think about, to really take away, it's this. What's one small change you can make today in your thoughts, your choices, or your relationships that brings you a little closer to that sense of wholeness? That's where the real transformation starts.
All right, folks, a small change to kick off a bigger wave. Definitely food for thought.